Hello and welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. Today we're going to do a small painting, but it'll be full length and talking about some detail. A Miss Peg Holland on the Patreon requested a full length video, so I'm happy to oblige. Of course, you're always welcome to follow along with anything I do. You have my express permission to sell anything you do whenever you follow along. I do have the Patreon if you would like to support the channel through there. And of course, please like, subscribe, follow. And I'm updating the Etsy, so I have newer stuff up there. So a whole bunch of new things. Anyway, today I have a 5x7. This is the New York Central paper. It's the block, it's hot press. I've been using that because with taping it down in this fashion, usually I have weird buckle issues, but when it's on a pad, not so much. So I really enjoy that. I crop it down to a smaller image. This is more cropped than I usually do in the vertical direction. This is probably more on the lines of, this is 5, this is probably 2.5 right here. I put an extra piece of tape right here just so my hand, when it catches ink inevitably, watercolor inevitably, I don't smear it. I brought it in on the side just a little bit. If it was to get matted, it would probably come to that edge with the mat, and then we'd have that extra space. Makes it nice and crisp and lets me sign it. And plus, less surface area to paint on. So despite me starting off with a lot of talking, we can get a lot done painting-wise because of the smaller area. So I'm using this is number 6 Paul Rubens. I believe I got this off of Amazon. There's more expensive ones and there's probably cheaper ones. But for the most part, if you're spending less than $20 on quill brushes, I think you're doing good. I use this one for big washes. I probably don't need it for this size. In fact, I'll still go with it since I already wet it. But a smaller one would be just as good, like a $5 one, a number 1 is this one. All right, so I'm gonna paint a version of yesterday's painting. So let's grab a little bit of a alizarin crimson. I'm gonna wash that right in the center. This is the Daniel Smith alizarin crimson. It's the, what's it called? The permanent one. This is Daniel Smith's Naples Yellow. Make a transition up. You could always play with the ideas of the rainbow. Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, etc. And if you follow that gradation upwards, red to a yellow orange to a greenish blue, it'll have a natural effect. So experiment with that and just kind of play around. And this is ultramarine blue. I think this is Daniel Smith's. And I'll bring it down here just in case. We can smooth some of the transitions if we want. But I've been doing these washes lately, especially with the smaller size and the quill, as opposed to creating things with the Hake brush, where you'll see that my approach was much different in other videos. Okay. This is a number 0 round. I've been using these just because they hold more pigment and I can get a variety of lines from them. And looking at this, I'm going to start with a background idea. And I've been playing with Da Vinci Sap Green and Da Vinci, this should be their Venetian Red. That's a mix that I used to use a lot for 2-color paintings, for tonalism, to get browns. You could use any mixes you want, just play around with different ones and see what works. But I was using this one yesterday and I was really having fun with it. It kind of mimics the effect of, I think, Daniel Smith Undersea Green. I have some of that on the palette so we can take a look and see. All right, so here's a quick background tree line. I can change the angle of this to get a little bit more dynamic. So you see right there, instead of horizontal, we can make it on an angle, get a vanishing point that we might be looking towards. So play around with those ideas and see. We can use more pigment, a darker tonality, just kind of with an atmospheric perspective where it's closer to us, so it's darker or more saturated. So, of course, experiment with those ideas. You see it's receding to that point, but get some variety, have some up and downs. Then this other tree line, I'll do a quick background tree line. This one will be horizontal, but I'm gonna go over this and closer with a closer tree line. Let's bring the tree line even with that side. Now we're still wet and wet, so you'll see that it'll soften and diffuse some. You can play around with the different concentrations of water in the initial wetness, initial washes, and that'll give you different ideas about how different wet and wets take place. Let's put a gap in that. Let's bring it up. All right, so just getting the idea out there. And these small sizes are really great for sketching. And then later on, once you get your ideas in place, you can paint it larger on a larger piece of paper with some more detail and different effects. This is Naples yellow that I'm feeding in to this background. I'm going to transition to a green. Let's get at the undersea green just so we can kind of compare. Yeah, really, well, not so much as the other mix. And then with land coming forward, I've been playing around with transitioning to a more redder foreground. But let's grab this. Let's see how it looks. This is New Gold by Da Vinci brand. In fact, I have a lot of different colors on the palette just to see which ones I go towards. This is quinacridone gold, Daniel Smith. There is some difference, probably just a difference in pigments that are used. But things like that, like exploring different, like, I almost want to say like a micro change in the color that you're working with from left to right really does help add a little bit more variety to it rather than a flat rate. Meaning, if I grab this, I think this is green gold, and kind of break up that undersea green. We have this horizontal line here, so let's look at breaking that up by bringing some more of the darker green down into it. Bring some into this corner. Just getting different ideas into play from left to right, as opposed to just one color going across. I'm just painting up against that little edge of tape. All right, so now I need to go into this foliage. You can see it's still wet and wet. Explore greens, especially darker greens for the shadows. But there's also some mixes we can play around with, which I'll show in a moment. I'm obviously using a lot more colors than I do than the large Hake brush paintings, But just once again, I'm exploring to see which ones I use the most and which ones I want to actually create a full palette with. So I think it'll be probably a year-long development. But right now I've been really into the different greens. So I'm just using this undersea green to do this. Another popular green, which I've been finding I've been using a lot ever since I bought it, was Paraline green. I think I've been accidentally saying that it's PR 33. I think it's actually PBR 31. So it's a black pigment, very good light fastness test. So it's like a number 2 out of 4, where 4 is the worst and 1 is the best. Okay. But I've been finding that that's been kind of a dark that I've been looking for, and having the premixes are kind of often easier for me. And I think I'm subscribing more to mixing on the paper as opposed to mixing on the palette. Okay, still wet and wet. Let me show you if we take a red into that Paraline green. And my go-to is alizarin crimson for that mix, but I have put out some other reds to explore. The alizarin crimson is so overpowering. I feel like I have to use more Paraline green in the mix, but you can get a nice dark with that. In fact, Da Vinci brand sells pre-mixes of a red and a green. I think it's like a phthalo green and probably like a Quin Rose or something. But they sell pre-mixed blacks from that, and from what is it? Ultramarine blue probably, and maybe burnt sienna or something like that, or ultramarine. I think they call them Jane's blacks, after Jane Blundell. Gamblin oil paints has something similar. They call it a chromatic black, which is a phthalo green and a red mixed together. So, a lot of different convenient stuff, and there's kind of like positive arguments for why to use mixtures of colors for black as opposed to just black. I really, I have black on the palette, and sometimes I'll grab that and put it in. In fact, I think this is lunar black. Let's just put it in here so we can see how that goes. A lot of people will poo-poo the use of black in watercolor. The argument is that it deadens the color, but try it out and see how it works for you. This, right off the bat, you got to realize this. There's people that will paint with a very limited palette, and some people that will paint with a whole wide palette of things. And if there's that much of a difference alone, then there's going to be difference in opinions on use of black and white. I like to extend kind of that line, that tree line underneath the shadow. All right, we're like still wet and wet. So staying wet and wet for so long is often through those applications, or through what's the other? The humidity in the house, the moisture levels, and the temperature. I just got in Hansa Yellow Light. This is a cooler yellow, kind of, I guess, a little bit greener. And I got that because I've been using the Hansa Yellow Medium so much. I really wanted to see the difference between the two and what the gradations, what possibility like I can do with them. That being said, I take the money from the Patreon and from YouTube whenever I get payouts to purchase these supplies for more experiments. And that's why I always say, if you want to support this channel, check the Patreon out, or subscribe on YouTube. That helps. So I often look for the edges of the outside. Here I'm playing a little bit with putting this yellow on the inside ridges of trees a little bit. It pushes green very, very quickly, but has a nice bright green to it. Finding little holes within the trees, or creating little holes with a mixture of whitewash and yellow. I don't have that mixture right now, but if I was to mix that up on my palette, that gives us an idea of areas that are kind of catching light, areas that are a little bit thinner compared to other parts, so we're seeing a little bit more glow through the foliage. We have all those options. I haven't been using a card to scrape lately. I've been using the back of brushes, and you can just go in there and just get some of those ideas in place. Not sure if it shows up that much, but it's something to kind of watch out for and see what's possible. Let's grab a little bit more black. Darken that. Here's just straight black over the land, just for us to see what it looks like. Okay, here's a interesting brush. I had these brushes when I was doing Chinese brush painting, and I think they were called like whisker brushes. Very small, thin, for like mouse whiskers. And with it, you can get some thin lines. It holds a lot of pigment, and it also gets very expressive. So we're going to use that on this one. However, when you use it, if you get one of these, I just recently bought a 3-pack off of Temu for like $2. If you're using it, when you put any sort of pressure, the whole thing spreads out and you get very thick lines. So we're going to try to be careful not to create lines with that. But when you wet it, it creates a very thin point. Okay, so here is Van Dyke Brown. I was using it a lot in the beginning of these experiments, but now I use it kind of as a separate color of its own. So you can see how thin we can go. And honestly, if I was using the #1 rigger, I would have to constantly refill and refresh and load the brush with more paint. There's the word. So we're just getting some vertical lines in with that. Let these trees sit in place. All right. Now, let's grab some Naples yellow on this. I don't know if this Naples yellow has like a PW pigment in it, like a white, but if we put it in, you can see through to the field behind it. Let me open that up a little bit more. Just add some interest. And of course, if you paint these larger, play around with different sizes. Like I said, the smaller size, since I'm painting a little bit differently, allows me to paint quick and get more more detail into the videos while I'm talking. So this is the Hansa Yellow light. I'm just looking for little openings with that. So here we had openings for the field. Here we just have some openings where it's kind of catching some glow. And we could also explore a little bit onto the edge. Maybe look for some glows in there. Okay, here's like let me grab a dark. Just grab some black. With the fan brush, if you want to do some textures, that'll help. If we put little textures down along the foreground, you can get some grass ideas and then put things into perspective. I think it's worth hitting with a blow dryer, so I'm going to pause the camera and do that. So a big idea that I'm going for with this composition is an area space, a background, etc. So what I'm trying to do is put some trees in the foreground that give the effect of walking amongst them and then having just area to explore. We'll call it the whisker brush just to make it easy. We'll use that. We'll grab a mix. We can do burnt umber and ultramarine. That's going to mix us a nice dark. Eventually, with the color explorations, I do expect myself to settle down with all the different colors. But okay, so we're using this brush, and you'll see that I started right here. I'm gonna do a line of these kind of thin, dead or deader type trees, and sit them in place. Then I'm gonna go a little bit more heavy-handed with the same brush and the same colors. Get thicker trees that want to come forward. So these are right out the foreground. So I'm not sure how the viewer's eye will read this, but the goal is a line of trees right here, a little gap, more trees as if you were able to walk amongst them, and then we have the field and then the background field. And kind of think of things like that. And even if we don't get that effect, we'll start figuring out ways to get that effect. Just throw in some branches and foliage and twigs. Now, I'm gonna look for the same thing over here. I could do the sense of depth, or I could have my tree lines come out of this spot. I think that's what it will do. So I'm kind of shaking it a little bit, squiggling it, and you'll see how we get some thick marks just from the very easy bend of the end of the brush. And I'm a pretty heavy-handed person, and I have a hard time getting nice small lines, but this brush works really well. Okay. Just making a little bit more paint. So guys like this, I really don't want to mix onto the palette. Because I'm using just a particular dark that I'm going for. But we have that same, and now it's a little too symmetrical. So what I've been doing is bringing this side more into the picture. You could play around with white, create birch trees. And now it makes it more of an opening right in here. Ideas of grass and overgrowth. Here is a small heat brush. I'm gonna grab whatever mix I can. In fact, let me do a quick mix. Let's use just some raw sienna. Let's get some of that out. I can try to pull it from the pan, or I can get a little soupy mix on the palette. I just don't want it too wet. Probably the less water, the more pigment, the better. So I want to kind of stipple some ideas in. All right, let's see. I'm going to come back with a thinner brush. This is like a really small round, like 18-0. And I'll just grab black for this. And I've been kind of then exploring the counter change. I'm using the smaller brush because I'm passing over exact points that I already did. So over the lighter areas, you can get it darker if we want. Oh, that's way too thick. Darker, darker. And in fact, then when I'm over a lighter area, I can put it in, but then I can also wipe it out to lift it. I'm going to do a dry off so I can do that step. So I don't use masking fluid because I just don't plan out that far. If I had coated the paper in gum arabic, it's like easier to lift. And if I painted very heavily, it'd be easier to lift. So what I'm going to do is just wet the side of that tree. You probably see a little bit of the highlight starting to come out. Since we're over the darkest part of that background, let's see if I can lift a little bit out. There we go. So if you do this, play around with your brushes, play around with the water content. How you wind up lifting is going to be an experiment for yourself to decide. All I can do is show you some different ways. So I'm just wetting and scrubbing a little bit. And I think we'll benefit from just stronger pigment in the areas that are over a light background. And if you don't have a Hake brush, let's see, here's an oil painting brush. I'm going to grab some Van Dyke Brown. So play around with your tools and see what you would want to use to mimic foliage stamping effects. If you look at the drawings of Van Gogh, so his drawings, his foliage is often cross-hatching. So if you want to grab a fan brush, you can really shorten that, do a little bit of cross-hatching in that. It's just a matter of which one you wind up liking, or use a mixture of them. Let's get a little bit tall grass. Let's darken up this corner. Let's see, any last things I want to do? So you can really see how expressive that brush can be. Just gently touching just the very end to the paper. Okay, so last dry off, we'll pull off the tape, see what it looks like overall, and then we will sign it. All right, I had got a little paint right up there. I dipped the corner of a magic eraser into my water and gently scrubbed it out. It scrubs out super easy. Magic eraser is not chemical, it's an abrasive, and it very easily kind of sands it back or whatever it does. That's why you can't use it on foodware, because I think it actually pulls up particles. All right, so there we go. I've been using just a pencil and signing into this bottom corner. I don't usually name them, but that being said, I should get in the habit of writing the year 24. I was looking through a Hudson River Valley book and or a tonalist book, and one of the guys signed it 99, 1899. So I had a little bit of a laugh because, thinking about that. And there we have it. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, follow, and I will be back soon. Bye.